Up next is our keynote address from Dr. Glenn Fleisig. Dr. Fleisig is the research director at the American Sports Medicine Institute and the founding president of the American Baseball Biomechanics Society. Dr. Fleisig.
All right. Thanks, Scott, for inviting me here. Anyway, I'm going to talk about something we all know about. We know about that there's a Tommy John surgery epidemic. And I'm going to talk about why are there so many injuries and what can be done to help prevent them. Again, I'm coming from, as Scott was saying, I'm at the American Sports Medicine Institute, also with the American Baseball Biomechanics Society, and I'm also an advisor for Major League Baseball. So, you know, Tommy John injury, we don't have to go too long. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, sorry, Scott, he's a Yankees fan, but Garrett Cole was the latest superstar to undergo this problem, and it's nonstop. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk to you about what is a Tommy John injury, and what are the different types of surgeries that can be done for that. Then I'm going to talk about the stuff, you know, my stuff, the biomechanics of the UCL injury. So UCL is the ligament, the Tommy John ligament. Then I'm going to talk about why are there so many of these injuries, and I'm going to end with some possible solutions, and then some questions and answers if we have some time. Okay, so Tommy John was a pitcher in the 1960s and 70s for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He was a teammate of Deborah's father, Dr. Mike Marshall. Well, he was Mike Marshall, wasn't a doctor yet. But Tommy was a lefty pitcher, a star pitcher for the Dodgers at this time. And then he felt something funny in his elbow. He then went to see his team's snappy dressed doctor. That's Dr. Frank Jobe over here. And something was wrong with his elbow. And Dr. Jobe talked to Tommy, and he said, I've spoken to Tommy and the late Dr. Jobe about this. But basically, Dr. Jobe said, you know, he had thought about this because a different pitcher on the Dodgers a few years ago had his career end briefly, too briefly, because of this kind of elbow injury. It was Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax a few years ago had his career cut short, and then Dr. Jobe had been thinking, what can I do? So what he did was he did what's called an ulnar collateral ligament reconstruction. This thing over here over my head, the part that's torn, that's the ulnar collateral ligament. Actually, the three pieces of the triangle are the ligament, but that's what ulnar collateral ligament looks like in a sketch and when it's torn. And so Dr. Jobe did a reconstruction of that. And Tommy John actually pitched, 12 years before the surgery, and he pitched 14 years after the surgery. He actually pitched more after the surgery. And here I am with Tommy John about 20 years ago at another convention. And then I was checking out his elbow. He didn't know what I was doing, but he just smiled for the camera. I was just kidding around with him. Okay, so when people have these types of surgeries, there are different types of surgeries that can be done. There's what's called UCL reconstruction. And as baseball fans, you're going to hear about these different surgeries. UCL reconstruction is what is conventionally called Tommy John surgery. It's similar to what Tommy had done on him. Then there's more recently a UCL repair with internal brace. And then there's something called a hybrid surgery. So UCL reconstruction, again, here's a sketch here. That's an arm, a right arm, and that's the hand and the shoulder. And what you do is, I don't really have a pointer, but you take out a different tendon or ligament, typically this tendon over here in your forearm, and you replace the torn ligament. That's a ulnar collateral ligament reconstruction or Tommy John surgery. There's something been called a UCL repair, which means let's fix it instead of replace it. And that's been around for a while, but it didn't really work before. It didn't really have good results. But recently, last few years, we've been doing UCL repair with internal brace, and that's been the game changer there. So what that is, I'm going to show you on my Instagram. That's my Instagram, The Biomechanical Man. I talked to Dr. Jeff Dugas, who works with me, who's really the founder of the UCL repair with internal brace, and Jeff will explain it here. Can you make it a little louder here, somehow?
Colleague, and also essentially the leader of this UCL repair with internal brace. Dr. Dugas, why don't you tell us a little what that is compared to the typical Tommy John surgery?
Well, Tommy John surgery, as originated by Dr. Jobe and then Dr. Andrews, you take a tendon and you create a ligament. So you weave it into bone tunnels to make it a new ligament. The repair with the internal brace uses the patient's own tissue if its quality is good enough. And we repair it back to where it tore on each end of whichever end it tore from. And then we augment it with what's called an internal brace.
And as you explained, that was the missing piece from used to do UCL repair back in
That's
the
right.
day. And that's really innovation that you have been in the forefront with companies doing it.
Well, Arthrex, made the construct. It's the internal brace is really a collection of things created to form a construct. It's a collection of products, including two plastic anchors, a tape, a suture, and so you create this spanning brace internally in the body.
What's the advantage or disadvantage, or when does it work and not work?
When it's good for it, when the patient is good for that procedure, when the tissue is the right quality and quantity, it's about half the recovery time. So instead of being a 12-month recovery, it's about 6.
Okay, I realize for these few squirms there that I showed a surgical thing and I'm not at a medical meeting, but that's the only blood and guts I'm showing in presentation. But as everything else is just going to be a sketch. But this is a sketch of what Dr. Dugas was talking about. And instead, UCL repair is you just try to fix what's there. And as he said, with the internal brace, the blue part there, people could get back in about 6 months and instead of about 12 or 14 months. And so it's a better surgery if possible. And you can only do it sometimes if the ligament is repairable, basically. Now, Dr. Keith Meister and some other doctors are now doing what's called a hybrid surgery, which is the reconstruction on the left, but then you put that blue internal brace and kind of trying to do the best of both worlds. So if you hear Dr. Meister did a hybrid surgery, it's the reconstruction plus with the brace. Okay, I'm going to talk about biomechanics, no more blood and guts. Biomechanics, let's talk about how the UCL really gets hurt. So here's a baseball pitcher with his arm cocked back, and we've tested over 5,000 pitchers over the years. And we've done a lot of the Cy Young Award winning pitchers in our lab and elsewhere. And you can see some of these guys, I'm not going to name names. But of the thousands of pitchers we've tested, we take a slice of the pie and look at the best pitchers we've tested in the last 10 years. And we look at what are the mechanics these guys are doing. I could tell you what happens in the elbow based on them. So if we watch this pitcher and he pitches, the body goes forward, but the arm cocks back. So your body's going in two directions. Your trunk's going forward, but your arm's going back. And it's called a valgus torque. You have like 100 Newton meters. It's a science term about, you might remember high school physics, but it's how much torque is going back. To try to translate what 100 Newton meters is, 100 Newton meters is the equivalent of holding 60 pounds in your hand. Imagine you're in that position. Someone is giving you like 5 12-pound bowling balls to hold in this hand. Imagine the stress on your elbow. That's how much stress there is on the elbow at that instant. Now that's called valgus torque, and you need equal and opposite varus torque to stop the injury. And the ulnar collateral ligament, you see a sketch here. We've done cadaver work where we cut open cadavers and we've seen how strong the ligament is. And the ligament does about 55% of the torque that's needed. So 55% of the 100 Newton meters means ulnar collateral ligament has to withstand about 55 Newton meters every pitch. Is that a lot? Well, it turns out when we do, I'll tell you a secret, when we do the cadaver experiments, when we're all done with the testing, we always test it till it breaks. We like to break things. So turns out the ulnar collateral ligament breaks at 45 Newton meters. Well, that doesn't make sense. What I'm saying is there's more load on the ligament every pitch than it can handle. And then why doesn't it tear every pitch if the load on it is bigger than what it can handle? Well, the answer is that type of cadaver model doesn't really consider what the muscles are doing, actually, because the dead guy's not doing anything with his muscles. So when we do simulations, we actually learn that there are 3 things. There's the ulnar collateral ligament, there's the bones, and there's the muscles. And they all kind of do about 1/3 of the stability or the resistance in the elbow. So if we redo the math, the 100 Newton meters, and if the UCL does about 1/3 of that, that's about 33 Newton meters. And we said in our cadavers that it's about 45 Newton meters the ligament can take. So we could see that it makes sense that the ligament's load is a little below, it's close to what it can handle. You know, this varies person to person and pitch to pitch, but it kind of makes sense. Now, we talked about it a little already this week, but there was a memo that came out from Major League Baseball on December 17th, a couple of months ago, about pitching injuries. This was a study, and some of the things that are in this is publicly available, is that this is a graph of, well, this is a crowd that knows how to look at graphs, I know that, but this is a graph of the years and how many injuries in red and how many days of injuries in blue. And you can see the injuries over the last 20 years have gone from 200 major league pitchers on the IL to 500, and the days comparable have more than doubled as well. If we look specifically at the Tommy John injuries, the blue are the minor leaguers and the red are the major leaguers, and this is all in the report. And you can see that the numbers have gone up in the last 10, 15 years from 100 injuries in pro baseball to close to 300. We have a problem, okay? So what Major League Baseball did was they said the first step to solving a problem is to identifying the problem, okay? And so they said, let's send out the survey to 200 experts, myself, 199 other people, and see what people think is causing the injuries, all right? And I'm going to show you what the survey said, but let me show you this Instagram from my thing again of what I posted, what I posted before this, what I think is happening.
Why are so many pitchers from major league level down to high school level getting off the field and getting injured and ending up over here in the surgery center? Research over the last several decades have shown that these are the factors related to reducing the risk of injury. Top of the list are amount of pitching and proper biomechanics. Unfortunately, in the last 15 years, the number of Tommy John injuries and other pitching injuries have gone up at all levels, from high school to professional baseball. This graph over here shows the number of Tommy John surgeries in major and minor league baseball in the last 15 years. The blip over here has to do with the pandemic and it was last baseball being played. This blue line over here shows the average fastball velocity over the same period in Major League Baseball. It looks like these lines are going up together. In other words, as pitchers are pitching faster, the number of injuries are going higher. It has to do with everyone loves the Raider gun and loves velocity. And what are we going to do? The pitchers, we can't tell them don't chase velocity because this is their ticket to college or professional baseball. The answer has to be that the college programs and the professional baseball teams have to wake up that for their teams to succeed, they need pitchers who do well, but also stay healthy. And the trick is to re-emphasize proper mechanics and also have their pitchers work on having a range of speeds, which will help them stay healthy, but also be successful.
So a lot of what I said there is what the survey found. There was a consensus. Most of the people surveyed thought that chasing velocity and pitching at maximum effort is the #1 cause. Other things identified in the report are chasing stuff, like trying to get more spin and vertical break and horizontal break, a lot of the things that we talk about at this conference. And also amateur overuse. Professional baseball and amateur baseball are connected, and the kids who are playing year-round and getting drafted, they're coming in with some damage already in their arm. So I want to talk about this chasing velocity and this maximum effort thing. Again, that's the graph that I showed before, and again, the blue is the velocity going up over the years, and with the blue chart, and the red is how many injuries, and again, the red blip is the pandemic year. But you can see velocity and number of surgeries are going up together. It looks like almost the same line, except for that blip. So but you know, as scientists, we know just because you show something, it doesn't mean cause and effect. So just because velocity is going up and surgery is going up, are the velocities the cause of the surgeries going up? And really, the thinking is that more velocity implies there's more force or torque in the elbow. You're throwing with more torque in the elbow, and more torque in the elbow increases your chance of getting hurt. So it's really those 3 steps. So I want to break these down and talk about this first 2-part. Do pitchers who pitch with more velocity really have more torque in their elbow or not? So we did this study, this biomechanical study, published a few years ago. We looked at some professional pitchers, and we took the slice of the pie, the red slice here, which were the pitchers. You know, in the lab, we said throw every fastball as max effort, but these 64, even though they tried to throw at max effort, they kind of gave us a range of velocity. They had a range of at least 5 miles per hour. So we had a nice data spread for them. And what we did was we tested them in the lab, as shown here on the left, and then we digitized their data, as shown there on the right, and we collected their data and calculated the torque on their elbow from my biomechanics, and we calculated the ball speed from a radar gun. And then we found this. This was the data for the first pitcher. You see, that's a pretty darn nice correlation. Each crosshatch or a plus sign is one pitch, and you can see on the horizontal, the faster he pitched, the more torque he had in his elbow. Pretty nice. This is the second dude. This is his line. And you can see he also, the faster he pitched, the more torque. And this is the third guy. You can see, and here's the fourth guy. You can see they each have within themselves a pretty nice pattern that the faster pitch was more torque for them. But you can see, and here's everybody. You can see everyone's line is in a different place. So there's a strong correlation within person, and a significant strong correlation that the faster you pitch, the more torque you had. But across people, if you just put one crosshatch for each person, you see people are all over the place. The guy on the top left, he threw at low ball velocity but had a lot of torque, whereas the guy in the bottom right threw at high velocity and had low torque. So you see there is a correlation line, but it's not a strong correlation. The R squared is 0.08. So velocity, more velocity does mean more torque, especially within a person, okay? So there's strong correlation there. And then across different pitchers, you could say in general, the faster pitchers have more torque in the elbow, but you can't say he has high velocity and he has high torque, or he has low velocity, he has low torque. It's just a trend, but there's a lot of individual differences. That makes sense, right? So how about the other part? So velocity does correlate with more torque, and does more torque correlate with more chance of injury? You would think so. And so there was an earlier study where they looked at 23 professional pitchers, and they digitized their biomechanics, and they calculated the torque, and they watched them for the next 3 years, and they found out, indeed, the injured pitchers had higher torque, 92 Newton meters, than the non-injured pitchers. It was significant. Now, that's what in biomechanics we've been kind of resting on that one, plus the common sense that more torque is more injury. But I'm happy to say that with Major League Baseball, we've now done a huge study where we followed 305 pro pitchers at their first spring training when they first got drafted, and we followed them for 5 years. And this is in review now, meaning the journals, hopefully it'll be published soon. But in this study, likewise, we also found that the injured pitchers indeed had more torque. So, so it does look like more velocity correlates with more torque, and more torque correlates with more injury. Now, today's pitchers, I saw this picture on the top right, and this was from 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you recognize, but that's Johan Santana, pitched 20 years ago as a 2-time Cy Young winner, staying next to Sean Manaea. And I'm like, wow, the pitchers today are, pretty big, a lot bigger than they used to be. So it's just a sample, obviously, but no doubt today's pitchers are bigger and stronger. And as I showed, throw with more velocity and have more injuries. So this is a reality. And so something's interesting that, when I say they're stronger, the guys today, and throwing with more velocity, big guys like me have, you don't laugh that hard, Scott. The bigger guys have bigger, stronger muscles, but do they have stronger ligaments? I mean, as their muscles are getting bigger and their bones, for bigger people, do they have stronger ligaments? So we did this study here.
Controversy in sports medicine and sports science about whether ligament strength is proportional to a person's height and weight. This is really important for baseball and other sports. For example, in baseball pitching, pitchers come in different heights and weights. And when we calculate the torque in their elbow, should we scale it? So what we did in this biomechanics lab is we did this study, which is available to download for free. What we did was we purchased 20 human right arms of men who were in their 20s and 30s. We stored their elbows in here. We took out their elbows. We came over to this table over here, and then we dissected the elbow, and we measured for the ulnar collateral ligament, the length, the width, and the thickness of the ligament. So we saw how big the ligaments were compared to what the height and weight were of the person. And then what we did was we brought the elbows over here into this MPS testing system, and then we tested the arm. We bent the arm, and we could test how strong the ulnar collateral ligament was to failure. We wanted to correlate and see if the height and weight of the subjects correlated or not with how strong the ligament was and how stiff the ligament was. It turns out it did not. In other words, bigger people do not have stronger or stiffer ligaments. So bottom line, in biomechanics, probably best to report forces and torques in newtons and newton meters, not scale them by height and weight. And for our clinicians, physical therapists, surgeons, and other physicians, probably not a good assumption that the bigger a person is necessarily means they have a bigger and stronger ligament.
So again, this is the problem here. The guys are too big and strong for their own ligaments. The ligaments haven't evolved like muscles and bones. So again, so these are the consensus from that survey. And so then the survey also asked the experts, what are the solutions? What can we do about it? And so the solutions that were mentioned in the paper were to de-emphasize velocity and effort, and to work with amateur baseball and try to help them not have pitch year round, and also to look at the training methods of baseball pitchers, and also have pitchers have better biomechanics. So breaking that down a little, pitching with varied effort, man, you know, Brian, I've been on your show and I'm talking about things. I've been trying to tell the teams that, and the pitchers, that you are going to have a better career if you don't throw every throw as hard as you can. That you have more durability, you're not worth anything to anybody or yourself if you're not pitching. And if we talk to the guys from 20 years ago, the All-Stars, they did not throw every throw as hard as they can, but they didn't have the radar gun in the stadium every time and judging them. So it hasn't worked. I've been telling people, and Dr. Andrews, we've been telling people, but the message has not, it's been received, but essentially not ignored, okay? So Major League Baseball is considering, you've probably heard some of these changes that they're considering, possibly limit the number of pitchers that could be on a roster at any time, limiting, which they do right now, limiting how many pitchers you could use, call up during the year, require a certain number of innings pitched for starting pitchers. Maybe you've heard this DH for starting pitchers only, also as an incentive for starting pitchers to stay in, that relief pitchers, when a relief pitcher comes in, the relief pitchers have to bat and you've lost your DH. So these are some things that are being bounced around in the media or within the rooms of Major League Baseball, trying to think for some solutions. Also, some things that are considered are changing in the recruiting and the rewards. Again, a pitcher at high school or in the Dominican Republic or in a college, they know that their ticket right now is the radar gun, not how many wins or strikeouts or whatever they have. And so if the rewards, if that's what they're being rewarded on, that's what they're doing, you know. But if the major league teams wake up and know that a guy with a little less velocity but good stuff might be more valuable, then the risks and the rewards might change. And also changes, Major League Baseball, we're working with amateur baseball, USA Baseball and others, trying to get, trying to help. You know, there is a thing called Pitch Smart, and we've made amateur limits for, in some leagues, about how many pitches kids could throw. So there's more work that needs to be done with that. I want to say I'm kind of encouraged by a lot of this stuff because, I don't know, I'm more encouraged now than 5 years ago because what we saw, what Major League Baseball did for the entertainment value. A few years ago, Major League Baseball looked in the mirror and said, you know, this game's a little boring, a little slow. And they had these this process where they thought about changes. They tried them in the minor leagues and Atlantic League with bigger bases and pitch timer and things like that. And it worked, you know? So I think the same model, we're kind of figuring out the problem, brainstorming and coming up with some solutions and trying them in minor leagues. I think this might work. And another thing that we talked about yesterday about the teams are now trying to improve their pitchers' biomechanics. Biomechanics is no longer just a thing in my lab in Birmingham, Alabama. The teams are doing it, and hopefully these pitchers could have better mechanics. And another thing that I think could work is increasing the ball weight. And you're like, wait, what, Dr. Fleisig? Are you crazy? What are you talking about here? Increasing the weight, if we make the baseball heavier, isn't that more force on the arm? And that, I mean, that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. So this is kind of an idea we came up with. And but the reason we came up with this is a few years ago, we did some research. You know, I was talking to some people about weighted baseball training methods, and people train with the weighted balls to get more velocity. And for that study, we did a biomechanical study, and what we did was we calculated what happens when you throw a 4-ounce, 5-ounce, 6-ounce, or 7-ounce baseball in our laboratory. And it was kind of strange. What you see here on the left side here, just look at the brown graph, because that was pitching from the mound. But as the ball got heavier, 4, 5, 6, 7 ounces, it was actually less torque on the elbow, not more, less torque. And then, and the reason is, if you look at figure 2 on the right, is the arm is moving a lot slower. So what's happening is, if you make the baseball a little heavier, it's a little more weight, but the arm moves a lot less fast, a lot slower. So torque for force is force equals mass times acceleration. That's also high school physics. But so the mass is a little more, but the acceleration is a lot less. So look at that. You actually, with these high school kids in this study, when they throw the heavier ball, it's less torque on their arm. So we approached Major League Baseball and we said, will you sponsor a study? We talked to the Major League Baseball, and we did a study which is now submitted to a journal and is in review, An Ounce of Prevention, how increasing ball weight and size decreases elbow varus torque. And what we did for this study, this is brand new. We tested 24 highly skilled college pitchers who pitch 87 miles per hour or faster. And we tested them in pairs. They came into our lab and they pitched, each pair pitched 4 innings in the lab, 7 pitches per inning, per half inning. And we had them, each inning, we had them pitch a different type of baseball. The one on the left there is the 5-ounce standard baseball. The one next to it is a 6-ounce standard size baseball. And then and then the next 2 are, well, I don't know if it's in that order, but then we also tested 5 ounces, 6 ounce, but slightly bigger baseball, which it looks like the second and fourth picture. So we randomized it. So that we put them in bucket A, bucket B, C, and D. We knew what it was, but we just said, okay, first inning, you're pitching bucket C, and tomorrow they're pitching bucket D first. We randomized it, and we knew what was what, and we had them throw 7 pitches each inning with each of those balls. And even though we threw 7, we threw out the data for the first 2 and just used the last 5 because maybe they were getting used to it, even though they were trying. They took warm-up pitches, but then they threw 7 for each inning. Anyway, we compared the biomechanics of throwing these different types of pitches. Turns out, when we switched from the 5 ounce to the 6 ounce, there was less shoulder rotational velocity, like I'm doing here. There was less elbow varus torque. There was less ball velocity, and we also tracked the ball movement, and there was less ball break when we switched from 5 to 6 ounces. When we switched from the 100% size to the 5% bigger, 105% ball, once again, that caused slower shoulder rotation, less elbow torque, and less ball velocity. So this is really encouraging. I think we got something here, okay? And so here's a graphical representation of the results from that study. Again, brand new. You can see the 5 ounce baseball in standard size in blue, and you can see the different variations of either making the ball bigger and or heavier. The torque on the elbow went down. And what's interesting is, remember a few minutes ago, I was talking about this 300 pitchers we tested prospectively and followed them. In that study, the torque of the guys who ended up having Tommy John surgery was like 100 Newton meters. And the torque of the guys who didn't get hurt was 90, 95 Newton meters. And you can see the weighted ball study, how it's kind of dropping the torque closer to the safe pitching and kind of getting away from the injury perspective. So I think this is something really good here. And so what we're going to do here, in conclusion of this study, what we found was that when we increase the ball, the best combination was increase it by 1 ounce and increase it by 5% bigger, that it makes less pitching torque and hopefully less risk of injury. So, we're calling it, like Ben Franklin said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. He was literally right 200 years ago. We're talking about 1 ounce here. And the bigger, heavier ball is less torque, less ball velocity, and less ball movement. Now, how would it play out in a game? If the ball is a little bigger and a little heavier and coming in a little slower, would hitters get hit by pitch more often, less often? Would it hurt more? Would they hit the ball more? I mean, the pitches are a little slower. But it's a little heavier. Would they not hit it as far? I mean, I don't know how that part will play out. I'm just talking from a safety, trying to get a grip on this epidemic of injuries. And frankly, Major League Baseball and Rawlings, they could mess around with the ball manufacturing technique, and the seams could be higher, or the ball could be tackier or less tackier, and it could be have more lively, the coefficient of restitution. So I'm just saying a bigger, heavier ball will be less torque in the elbow, and then there are other considerations about how this would play out. Now, that's a lab study, and it's a big leap of faith for Major League Baseball now to say, okay, next year we're doing this. So there has to be some further steps. There might be more biomechanics research in the lab, but I think we are also going to do some field studies and try it in some league and see how it plays out, both from performance and safety, and also monitor the biomechanics and see what people think about it. So this is, I think we have a good solution here. I mean, a possible solution here. So in conclusion, UCL injury rates continue to rise. The MLB report identifies some likely factors, and players and teams are continuing to pitch with the risk factors because the rewards outweigh the risks, in their opinion. MLB is exploring some solutions. And so we're going to continue this conversation next Sunday. I think Scott mentioned some of this, that we're going to have this online webinar. It's going to be ABBS and SABR. Everyone who's a SABR member should be getting an email about it, or you could go to that website to sign up. We'll talk more about it with some of these other experts. Also, you don't have to be a biomechanist to join American Baseball Biomechanics Society. This is the website, baseballbiomechanics.org. Again, that seminar next week is for members of SABR and members of ABBS, but also we do talk about other biomechanics stuff there. You can follow me on Instagram. Here's my contact information. And I'm going to open it up for questions now. So thank you. Oh. Okay, well, you're right here, so you're closer.
Thank you very much. That was super informative. Was really intrigued by the study done with the weighted balls and the different sizes. Was that study just conducted on fastballs only?
Yeah, good question. That was just on fastballs only. The next study, when we do it in a field setting, we'll do other types of pitches as well, and see if the torque goes down with the other types of pitches as well.
Yeah, that was my biggest question is, how do you think that might affect pitchers who are trying to put like gyro spin on the baseball?
Sure. My guess is the same thing will happen with all the pitches, that the torque will go down, but needs to be tested. Yeah. Who else wants a question? Right behind you to your left there.
Thank you. I thought this was great. Obviously, you mentioned that as from a recruiting and like college standpoint, people are still pushing velocity. But how do you try to combat that with guys who already have established major league success, guys like Ben Joyce, who claim they think they could throw 107 miles an hour?
Say that last part. So
How do you convince pitchers who are already having established big league success, who are still chasing velocity, like a Ben Joyce? Like, how do you combat them from trying to throw harder and kind of outweigh the risks?
Okay, so my experience is it's really hard to make major leaguers change, either their mechanics or their velocity or anything like that. The people who are more receptive are the minor leaguers. The minor leaguers are hungry to be major leaguers and are more likely to have different training, different biomechanics, different pitching approach. The major leaguers, they made it and they're less receptive to making changes that are suggested. However, they still try to make some changes. They still try, the good ones still try to improve, but it's a tough sell to a major leaguer. So it's more to the minor leaguers, I think. Yeah. A nice one bouncer there. Yeah. Yeah.
When you were testing with a different weight and different sized baseballs, did you measure any differences in velocity or break
In velocity of the ball, you think?
or break?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So yes, the heavier ball and the larger ball had less velocity, and it also had less break. Yeah, fastballs only.
Great work, Dr. Fleisig. It's fascinating. Something that seemingly had no solution, that could be
Fingers
possibly.
crossed. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did the pitchers know what ball they were using? Could they tell when they threw it?
They did not. Okay, they did not. Okay. Did they know? No, but could they tell? Maybe. So what happened was.
Yeah, once they had, you randomly gave it to them, did they know, hey, that's the 5, that's the 6, that's the big 6?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little more specifics. We tried to be scientific, have integrity, and not, but we also tried to tell them as little as necessary. Okay, so what we did was they signed consent forms. We told them, you're doing an experiment where you're testing different types of baseballs. We didn't say heavier balls. We didn't say lighter balls. We didn't say 5 ounce, 6 ounce. We said, you're testing different types of baseballs. They said, okay. And then we said, you're going to test 4 types of baseballs today. Again, I didn't say what the choices were even. And I said, okay, you're using bucket A, bucket B. And then when they threw it, sometimes they said to their buddy, I think that was the regular baseball, or that one felt heavier. But scientifically, it was called a blinded study where basically they didn't know the answer. They had some opinions, but they didn't know.
Were they, did they know? Were they guessing correctly?
Sometimes they were wrong. Sometimes they were right. Yeah.
Okay. How
Yeah.
has it been received in official quarters?
For Major League Baseball?
Yeah, what's the initial thought of it?
Well, they were, Major League Baseball, the commissioner's office was pleased that the money they paid for here did show what we were hoping to see. However, cautious. And then there are many more steps. I want to go quickly, but Major League Baseball wants to be cautious and have some of these next scientific steps, but they were pleased with the initial results.
And the secondary benefits could be things that we're looking to do already.
Well, yes, very, very clearly, Major League Baseball wants to tackle this injury and try to help this injury problem. I mean, that 200-page report, that 200-person report is evidence that they're trying to. And I think they like the study, and they're going to support us doing some more research.
But I mean, even past that, ball in play, a little less velo, strikeout rate down. There's a lot of things that.
Yeah, that, I don't know, Brian, that's, I don't know how that's going to play out, and I don't know who's going to be the decision makers there. So I think the first thing is, whether it was this or a previous test, the first thing is to see if it's safe, and then try it in some trial situations, and then get feedback from the players, see how it plays out. We don't know. We don't know yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I thought your case for against normalizing torque by height and weight was compelling. I was curious, obviously we talked about improving pitching mechanics across the league. A bunch of teams have biomechanists that, had 0 biomechanists years ago. Do you feel like the one like catch-all metric then is just torque divided by velocity as like like if you had to choose one thing to show, are pitching mechanics actually improving? Is that your ratio, or is there something?
Yeah, no, so it's a really good point. So we actually published a paper, we called it biomechanical efficiency. We didn't call it pitch efficiency because then people would think it's what your pitch count is. But biomechanical efficiency is how much velocity you get divided by your elbow torque. So I think that's a key parameter. You're trying to maximize how much velocity you get per torque. So I think that's a key parameter, kind of balancing performance and safety. Yeah. And as far your question about normalizing or not normalizing,
Saying like, I think, well, I've worked with biomechanics before, and, you know, we've worked on normalized, like torques to height and
Yeah.
weight, kind of account for the muscle stuff. So I thought like your point about the UCL naturally getting stronger, even as people's muscles get bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
What was compelling? I guess a quick follow-up, like, do you have an idea of what's realistic and that, like, efficiency score? Like, if someone throws 100 torque, let's say someone throws like 95 miles an hour at 100
Right.
torque. What do you think would be like a realistic amount of torque that you could lower if you were to improve this, you know, pitcher's mechanics? And I'm speaking
yeah,
in general.
sure, sure. It's a lot of questions here, but let me just say, the normalized or not normalized, we also have published papers where we normalize and papers where we didn't normalize. What we're saying here is, when we're comparing different pitchers, do we just say torque or torque per height and weight? Because different people are different sizes. And so I've done both in the past, but moving forward, we're not going to normalize.
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't a question, that was a comment. I was saying like,
Yeah.
I thought it was a compelling case.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And as far as what's proper mechanics or what the ultimate load, it's hard to answer that. So, yeah, let's go on.
When conducting the study with different size and weights of balls, did you see the pitchers using like compensatory methods to did you see changes in things like shoulder torque or compensation in the trunk or anything like
Yeah,
that?
so we did, good question. We did look at all those things. First of all, Alex, right? You worked at Driveline, right? And so I think you'll agree with me, taking the science out of it, when you hand someone a baseball that's a little heavier, a little lighter, the first few throws, they're going up there or down there, and it's wild. You just change it by 1 ounce and they've totally lost it. And it takes them a few throws to get used to it, okay? So it's kind of an interesting thing. But then as far as once they're good and the pitches that we did, that we tracked, we calculated more than just elbow torque. We also calculated stride length and knee angle and all that stuff. And there was no significant difference in the mechanics from the different things. Statistically, they're significant, but not clinically, meaning when they change the ball, the angles changed by 1 degree or less, one degree or less. So statistically it showed up, but it's meaningless. It really, essentially they pitch with the same mechanics with the different balls.
There's been talk about potentially shortening the MLB season at times.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a possible solution, especially moving to more of the warmer months? Because it feels like a lot of injuries happen in the early cold months, even if it would be a hit to MLB teams' earnings.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been in that conversation, so I can't tell you the official MLB comment, but I have heard that also perhaps going back to 154 games like they used to do, for various reasons, not just for safety, but as far as how long the season is, and you have a longer playoffs now. So I have heard talk about that. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but that is, you know, how many games you pitch is definitely a factor. So like in amateur baseball, we try to have limits of how many pitches and how many games they could pitch. And so having less games could be potentially part of the solution. But as we've seen in the last few years, the starting pitchers are actually pitching less innings than they did ever before. So, but they're pitching it harder and with more velocity. So I don't think that's a priority part of the solution right now. Maybe a lot of people back, let's start working our way back there.
I realize that I am way behind.
I think you had to hold it a little close. You had to hold it a little closer. Yeah.
Sure. What are you estimating the torque based upon the speed of motion of the body, or is there any other basis behind it? Because
Yeah.
you said you're assuming you got less torque.
Yeah,
You're
okay.
saying it very, very with great confidence.
Yeah.
What's the basis for that confidence?
So that's a good question. I don't want to get too technical, but I will tell you the big picture here because you guys will understand it. We are not directly measuring force or torque in the joints. The only way to directly measure force or torque in a joint is to stick something in someone and measure the force. For instance, when people run and stuff, we do directly measure ground reaction force because people land on a force plate, okay? But we're not directly measuring this. We're using just the Isaac Newton, force equals mass times acceleration. So how it's done is we say we have these charts and stuff that if a person is 6'2", then their forearm weighs 4% of their body, and you multiply by that. And then we also know the moment of inertia of different parts of the body. So essentially there are these charts that you say a guy is this much height, this much weight, therefore his forearm is probably about this much mass. And then we directly measure the acceleration from the motion. And we do that. Other things that are being used in science, in biomechanics, is like the driveline has the pulse, which is a sleeve, and there are other sensors. Those don't directly measure force either. I mean, that's a wearable technology, but that measures acceleration and angular velocity. It measures acceleration, and it also uses the equation force equals mass times acceleration. So there are no direct measurements of force, and there are errors in the thing, but it's been used many years in biomechanics and seems to be working pretty well. It was a good question.
Straighten out, it's okay. You're not a baseball player per se, okay? Do you have any explanation for why bigger ball slows the arm down by that 1%? Just there?
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty obvious that a bigger ball, if you took a ball that's a little heavier or a ball that's 5 pounds, it would go slower. It's slower to move that thing. The interesting thing is that the force and torque is less. I mean, a heavier thing is more mass, and it could have been proportionally less velocity. None of us could throw a heavier thing faster. But the fact is that the arm slows down even more than you would think is, I think, the ticket for what's going to make this work.
But it sounds like bigger or heavier ball is somehow forcing the pitchers to try less hard.
Yes.
I guess that's the problem where you're gonna have trouble.
Yes. And then we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Also, these guys were in the lab for an hour, and what happens if you do it for a week or for a season? We don't have all the answers yet. We have to play it out. Yeah.
Guys, hand up for you. Sorry about that.
Two things. First is, there are kids in middle school and high school that are already being taught how to throw as hard as they can and get that spin rate up. So how, isn't the genie out of the bottle? How do you, that's my first, but how do you combat that?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think Major League Baseball, if they make some of these changes they're talking about, such as limiting how many pitches could be on a team or pitchers could be on a team or things like that, right now, the reward system is the pitchers who are making it are just throwing as hard as possible. They don't have good velocity. They're not mixing their pitches. Don't have command. So the reward system right there is, we all watch it and we see the announcers talk about it that this pitcher has no idea where his pitch is going. He's just throwing it as hard as possible. So I think with the teams now using biomechanists, maybe there's some hope. But again, in the high school level, like you're talking about, I don't know. We got to change we had to change the paradigm where you don't advance just because you light up the Raider gun. You advance because you got a lot of outs or you pitched well. It's tough. It's a tough battle.
My next question is, I think at previous years, they had another doctor that said they were doing preventative surgery. You know anything about that? So you don't get Tommy John. So they can do this I may have been at the MIT Sloan conference. I think there was a doctor who was talking about like operating on 14, 15-year-old kids you heard about this to prevent?
I've heard about it from parents. I've never heard about it from a doctor, and it's immoral and unethical. No, none of the doctors I know do surgery to prevent future problems, because frankly, the ligament we got to start with is better than anything, the surgery. The doctors, although they have big egos, they're not as good as the creator, they most of them think, and they know the original parts are better. And so that's an urban myth. I don't know any surgeon who does surgery as a preventive situation. Absolutely don't.
Dr. Fleisig, so the slide that you show, there's a relationship between velo and torque. A lot of pitchers, they're under 90 miles per hour, their velo. Would you expect that relationship to continue if they throw like 95 miles per hour to like 100? That's my first question.
Right.
The second question is, I think.
Wait, I didn't do the first question, Matt. Okay, so yeah, could we extrapolate the graph higher than I showed? Because the guys in my lab were not throwing 95 miles per hour. I assume so. I assume it would continue to extrapolate. What do you think, Matt?
No, it is not.
You don't
There
think?
is a plateau.
There's a plateau about how much
Yeah.
torque?
There is a plateau.
Okay, all right.
So my second question is, the study that you showed increasing the weight, did you tell them what the intent is? Because I would assume if you tell them, throw as hard as possible, you 5 ounce, you throw like a 92, 6 ounce, you have to throw 92 because that's what's in game.
Yes, it's a good question.
I think I don't think that's the answer. I really don't think that's the answer. I think that's when the adaptation happened.
Right.
Pitchers start to adapt that 6 ounce ball, the torque is gonna go up.
Yeah, but on the other hand, so first of all, the first part about that, in the lab, in a typical lab, a pitcher comes by on a typical day, we're evaluating him. We have the radar gun display up and he knows how hard he's throwing. And my instructions on a typical day are throw your fastballs at full effort down the middle, okay? For this experiment, we turned the radar gun display off, so they didn't see what their speeds were. And we told them every inning, every pitch, throw your fastball full effort down the middle. So they did not have the feedback that they were throwing ball A or ball B at less velocity. What was the other part you're saying?
Now, what I'm trying to say is, because you made a comment that safety first, and then we figure it out. You don't know what's gonna happen. I think this is not a good.
Okay, I got you.
Because you have to think about the game, how the game played.
Right.
So if you just one study with I don't know how many pitchers throw 4 innings, same game, and you make that suggestion.
Right.
I think it's gonna be concerning. My opinion, but it's just my opinion.
Okay, so on that, and then we'll have one or two more questions, but again, as I showed, the guys are bigger than ever before. So what a 5 ounce baseball feels like to today's 6'5", 240 pitcher compared to the 5 ounce baseball in the hand of the 1990 pitcher who was 6'1" and 200 pounds. These guys, if I threw a wiffle ball or a tennis ball as hard as I can, I'm going to hurt my arm, I believe, sooner than if I throw a baseball. Less pitches it'll take because I'm whipping my arm, more acceleration. So I think these balls, today's 5 ounce baseball is like a tennis ball or a wiffle ball in our hands. It's too light and there's too much acceleration leading to injury. So Matt, why don't you throw it to, let's take 2 more questions and then we'll call it quits.
I was also kind of interested in what he was saying because I thought there was an interesting point that you kind of glazed over quickly, that there were a good amount of pitchers who were able to throw at high velocities with low torque.
Right.
And I was wondering if there's been any look into is that a better solution? Just saying everybody throw a harder ball? Why not look into why those players who can throw higher velocities with lower torque and try to emulate them?
Absolutely. That goes with what Alex was saying here also. And that's why these biomechanists have jobs, because I do think if you modify a pitcher, this is what my career has been, but what they're doing, if you modify a pitcher's biomechanics, hopefully you can get more velocity for less torque. And so, yeah, for sure, that should be part of the solution. And again, I'm optimistic because the teams of 10 years ago weren't using biomechanics. They were using coaches who watched and maybe used video and didn't have the science. So I do think optimizing, improving biomechanics can help pitchers have less torque. Yeah. Let's do last question. Pick your favorite person and throw it to someone.
Question is, with relationship to the size of the ball, I'm curious, given, the influx of players from Japan and Korea, my understanding is the ball is smaller, it weighs slightly less. Is there data there that you've looked at or considered looking at as some of these players transition into the MLB?
Right. I haven't, I don't know if there's anyone here who's international, but my understanding is that Japanese baseball is the same size and weight, but it's tackier. It's a tackier. Does anyone have any knowledge? Is it a different height or is it a different size or weight? Yeah. Okay. So obviously I didn't know the answer, but there's some answers. Oh, wait, Scott's telling me, he's mouthing words. You are boring. Get off the stage. Or is that what you're saying? Okay, one more. Okay. All right. All right. Who's talking here? Who's talking about it?
Professional baseball in Japan suffering the same arm injury epidemic, and whatever happened to the shoulder or the rotator cuff injury?
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to do the second part first. There are, I showed you the graphs of the Tommy John going up. The number of rotator cuff surgeries are actually going down. Is a twofold thing. One is maybe more force, or maybe the elbow is breaking first. But the other thing is the surgeons are more willing to do an elbow surgery and they are less willing to do a shoulder surgery than before, because the elbow surgeries have good outcomes. The shoulder surgeries don't. So we're seeing less shoulder surgeries. As far as what's happening in Japan, again, I'm not an expert at it. I have a few colleagues there. I think they tend to be like one step behind us, where they're catching up in number of injuries, but they didn't have as many as we had before. But they're catching up, I think, unfortunately.
I was told that in Japan that they throw like 200 pitch bullpens, but not at max velocity. So they build up arm strength. And has there ever been a thought of lowering the mound? Would lowering the mound, 3 inches, would that?
Yeah, so we looked at that. We looked at lowering the mound with Major League Baseball, and it did not have a huge effect. There was some thinking that if you had like flat ground, it would be lowest force, but it really did not have a significant effect. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
You look like this thing out right over here from that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. So when we wrapped up our awards presentation, I lied. And I lied because frankly, I like surprising people. Not everyone loves surprises, so I guess we're taking a risk here. The reason that I lied is the award that we still have to present is the SABR Analytics Conference Lifetime Achievement Award, which honors members of the sabermetric community for their contributions to improve our understanding of the game of baseball. Past honorees include Gary Huckabee, Andy Andres, Sean Foreman, Bill James, Pete Palmer, and Dick Kramer. This year's winner is Dr. Glenn Fleisig. One second, I'll introduce him. Dr. Fleisig is a leader in baseball pitching biomechanics, identifying mechanics for minimizing elbow and shoulder loads while maximizing velocity. He has led studies correlating pitching volume to injuries, leading to pitch count regulations in Little League Baseball and other organizations. In addition to his work at ASMI, Dr. Fleisig has served as chair of the USA Baseball Medical and Safety Advisory Committee, the Medical Committee for Major League Baseball, safety consultant for Little League Baseball, and as an advisory board member of the National Pitching Association. He has also personally tested the biomechanics of thousands of baseball pitchers over the last 2 decades, providing safety and performance feedback. It is my distinct pleasure to recognize Dr. Glenn Fleisig with this year's SABR Analytics Conference Lifetime Achievement Award.